Hello. In this video, we're going to talk about preparing the reports that go into the Director of Elections after closing on Election Day.
We will demonstrate how to complete the election night report necessary before you pack up the polling place and return the materials to the General Registrar. You will need the zero tapes. There's 3 copies.
Here, and they have to be signed by all the officers of election that were present at the opening.
The results tapes. Again, 3 copies.
Here, and again signed by all of the officers that were present at the closing.
The electronic poll book summary sheet, 2 copies.
Here, these come from the poll book officer, and they have to be signed by the poll book officer and also initialed by the chief.
The equipment officer's opening and closing report, 2 copies.
Here, and these will be signed by the voting equipment officer or the chief.
And the closing ballot report, 2 copies.
Here, and these are signed by the ballot officer. You also may find, if you've had provisional ballots during the day, that you'll have the green envelopes from the provisional ballots that were cast, and you'll need these if you had any cast. Now, in terms of the outputs that go to the Director of Elections, the first thing that will be is the precinct report, which will be called in by telephone. Second is the statement of results office copy. The third is the statement of results, which will go to the clerk of the court. And then finally, we have the printed return sheet, which will also go to the clerk of the court. The first thing we'll do after the polls have been closed and all the preliminary paperwork inputs have been prepared and given to the chief is to prepare the election night precinct report to call into the office.
So you will have to run the voting results report out of the DS200.
Right here.
And assemble the other inputs described earlier in the video. And then you're ready to prepare the election night precinct report. Ensure that the date and the precinct are on the top of the election night precinct report.
Here and here.
Record the number of voters checked in. You get this from the electronic poll book summary report. It is the number in the checked in count row in the closing column.
That's from here.
Next, fill in the total public count. This information is from the results tape.
It comes from the tape. Now, if you have any provisional ballots, you'll have to bring the green envelopes over and record the number of provisional ballots that were cast, and also using this code on the back of the envelope, the reason that they were cast, and fill in each of the 6 categories for a provisional ballot. If you have no provisional ballots, then you should fill a 0 in those. Do not leave them blank.
Next, record the number of curbside voters. You can get this from the electronic poll book summary report, and it's listed on the report as the OP count, or the outside the poll count.
Now, these preliminary results have to then be called into the office. Use the office phone number, which is pre-printed on the form, 540-955-5168, to give the preliminary results read directly from the tape to the Director of Elections office. Now, the press, the candidates, media are all waiting to hear preliminary results. So fill out the precinct report and phone those results in first before you prepare any of the other election night reports. Okay, now that we've completed the precinct report and called it into the Director of Elections office, next we'll put together the statement of results. So on the statement of results, the first thing you'll do is check to see that the precinct name is correct, the election date is correct, and the type of election is filled in. Then we'll begin to put the numbers in it. First we'll get the voter check-in, which comes from your EPB summary sheet, which is right here. Next, we'll get the outside the polls voters, and this number comes from your EPB summary sheet under OP for outside the polls count, and that goes here. Next, what we'll do is we'll put in the number of ballots that were cast. The ballots cast comes from the results tape, so we'll take the public count from the results tape, which is right here, and we'll find the public count, enter that here. Now, next is any number of ballots that were counted by hand. If you have any ballots that had to be counted by hand because of a machine failure or something during the day, call the Director of Elections office and ask them how to account for those. You'll use a SOR supplement sheet to do that. Most of the time, for most elections, that number will be 0. And so then we add those two together to come up with the total number of ballots cast. So now you want to turn this over, and you want to answer the question on the back. Does the total number of voters marked as checked in match the total number of ballots that were cast in your precinct? Yes or no? If it's yes, then there's no need to fill anything further in it. But if you check no, then you have to explain what the discrepancy is between the number of voters that checked in and the number of ballots that were then cast. Finally, for the statement of results, you have to have all of the signatures of all of the officers of election that are present at closing and the officers of election that came and worked in the morning but left at noontime. They, when they depart, have to sign in with their time in and their time out so that there's a record of when they worked on the election. Once you've gotten all the signatures then on the first statement of results, which is the copy that goes to the office, then you repeat the process for the copy that goes to the clerk of the court. You have to fill in again the precinct, election date, etc., and fill in the numbers separately from the first one. Turn it over, again, check the box yes or no for the number of ballots cast matches the number of voters that checked in, and again have all the officers of election sign the second copy that goes to the clerk of the court. Now the last thing we'll do with the statement of results is we'll assemble them into a complete package. All of the inputs that were brought into at the beginning of this process will go into the statement of results. So first, you'll take a 0 report. Now there's a way to cut the 0 report so that you can easily assemble the statement of results. First,
So my question is, how do you know where to cut it? Because it doesn't say cut here.
if you bring me the scissors, I will show you. Starting with the 0 report, starting at the bottom of the tape, come up until you come to the first blank section.
That's right here.
And it's right here where it says end of report, and it's followed by 0 totals report and a blank section in between. That's where you cut from the bottom up. So we'll cut that there. And then this piece will be put onto the printed return sheet, and that will go to the clerk of the court. Then come back up the tape again, note that there's signatures here, to the next big blank space in between end of report and 0 totals report, and this is where you cut the second time.
When did we have them sign this?
They sign this report in the morning after they run the 0 tape. That's when all the officers of election sign it.
So the tape is still one piece in the morning. We
That's
don't cut
correct.
it till tonight.
That's correct. You don't
Okay.
cut the tape until the end of the day. Then the third piece has, in addition to the 0 report, it also has a configuration report, which the Director of Elections office needs to keep on hand. So you don't cut that any further. You just fold it in half, and that becomes the third one.
Where does this go?
And this one goes on the office copy of the statement of results, right here.
Okay.
Now, the totals tape has a slightly different process because there's a write-in report on the end. Recall from the earlier demonstration when we printed out the totals tape from the DS200, we had to print a second copy of the write-in report.
So where are you going to cut this now?
I will show you. You start at the bottom of the write-in report and work up until you come to the first big blank space again, in between end of report and write-in review report, and you cut this here.
And where does this one go?
This write-in report goes on the clerk of the court copy here.
Can I fold it in half like that?
You may. You can fold it as much as you need to fit onto the page.
That's good to know.
The second write-in report you want to keep attached to the totals report that it is attached to. So this will be the third copy of the totals report, so you just keep going until you come to the hatched lines here. And those hatched lines is where you cut this one. Now this report, which has a write-in report integral to the results tape, goes into the office copy right here.
Now when you said hatch lines, it's actually a double row of asterisks.
That's
You cut
correct.
right in between.
The next one that you'll cut, again, is a totals report. Again, you have the double row of hatched lines.
Let's hold this up so they can see that better.
We'll cut that right there. Now that totals report goes onto the top of the clerk of the court's copy. Now the third one, the final one, we want to trim right here again at the double asterisk line. And we will take the results portion of that, and that goes on the printed return sheet. And the very top portion is again header information. It's similar to the configuration report on the zero tape, but it's entitled Ballot Status Accounting Report.
Would that go
That
here?
goes in the office copy.
Got it, yes.
So now you have a zero tape, a results tape, and all the header tapes on the office copy. You have a zero tape and a results tape on the clerk of the court's copy, and again a zero tape and a results tape on the printed return sheet. To complete putting the statement of results together, you now take one each: the poll book report, the voting equipment opening and closing report, and the closing ballot record report with the tapes that you just cut, and you put a paper clip on each of these. Paper clips, please, nurse.
Yeah.
And that's the office copy.
Paper clips, don't staple them.
Take the second one with the tapes and paper clip these together.
And then these
And then the printed return sheet. Now the printed return sheet goes to the clerk of the court. You have to fill it out. Date of election goes here, the county, the precinct, and it has to be signed by all the officers of election that are present at closing. You have to include the machine with the serial number here, which is the serial number of the DS200. That comes from your equipment status report. And then all of the officers of election that are present at closing sign this printed return sheet. The only thing that's attached to that are these two tapes, one zero tape and one results tape.
Do you want to tell them where these go next?
Yes, all of these, this goes in envelope number 2. The clerk of the court copy also goes into envelope number 2, and the printed return sheet goes into envelope number 2A. And that concludes how you prepare the paperwork for at the end of the election.